The explosion of the first Veltari ship lit up the darkness of space like a small sun. Jake Morrison did not have time to celebrate. 2 more enemy vessels were coming, and they were angry. "Hard left," Lisa shouted, and Jake obeyed without thinking. A blast of green energy passed through the space where they had been a moment before. If they had stayed on course, they would be dead. Ryan fired the pulse cannons at the nearest enemy ship. The shots hit the shields, but did no real damage. Their small weapons could not penetrate Velthari armor through a direct assault. They needed to be smart. "Amy, what are they saying?" Jake asked. Amy listened to the enemy communications through her headset. Her face was pale but determined. "They're confused. They didn't expect us to fight back. The commander of the patrol group is requesting more ships." "How many more?" 9. Jake's jaw tightened. 12 ships to hunt down 1 small reconnaissance vessel. The Velthari were taking them seriously now. That was both good and bad. "Lisa, I need options." Lisa was already working on her console. Numbers and diagrams filled her screen as she analyzed everything they had learned about the enemy. "The 2 ships chasing us are flying in a standard pursuit pattern. They're staying close together for mutual support. If we can separate them..." "How?" "There's a dense asteroid cluster about 40,000 kilometers from here. Lots of big rocks, tight spaces, perfect for a ship our size. Too dangerous for ships their size." Jake smiled. "Then that's where we're going." He pushed the engines to full power and raced toward the asteroid cluster. The 2 Velthari ships followed, firing constantly. The Sparrow shields dropped to 50%, then 40%. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit. "We can't take many more hits." "We won't have to." The asteroid cluster appeared on the view screen, like a wall of tumbling rocks. Jake did not slow down. He flew straight into the chaos, weaving between massive boulders that could crush them in an instant. The Sparrow was small and nimble. It could fit through gaps that larger ships could not. The first Velthari ship tried to follow. It was too big and too slow. The pilot attempted to navigate through a narrow passage and misjudged the distance. The ship's wing clipped an asteroid, sending it spinning out of control. It crashed into a larger rock and broke apart. "One down," Ryan said with grim satisfaction. The second ship was smarter. It pulled back and waited at the edge of the cluster, hoping to catch them when they emerged. But Jake had no intention of playing that game. "Amy, can you send a fake distress signal? Make it look like we crashed somewhere in the cluster." Amy thought for a moment. "I can try. Give me a minute." While Amy worked, Jake kept the Sparrow moving through the asteroids. Every second felt like an hour. His arms ached from fighting the controls, and sweat dripped down his face. But he did not complain. His crew was counting on him. "Done," Amy said, "sending the fake signal now." The remaining Velthari ship detected the distress signal and moved to investigate. It flew into the cluster, following the signal toward what it thought was a crashed human vessel. It found nothing but empty rock. Jake came up behind it. "Ryan, you have 1 shot. Make it count." Ryan aimed carefully. He waited for the shield cycle that Lisa had identified earlier. When the gap appeared, he fired. The torpedo struck the enemy ship in its reactor core. The explosion was so bright that Jake had to shield his eyes. When he looked again, there was nothing left but debris. 2 ships destroyed. The Sparrow had survived. But the celebration was short-lived. On the edge of the asteroid cluster, 9 more Velthari ships had arrived. They spread out in a formation that blocked every escape route. "We're surrounded," Lisa said quietly. On the Crimson Talon, High Commander Zorath watched the battle unfold with growing anger. He had lost 3 ships to a single human scout vessel. 3 ships crewed by trained Velthari warriors, destroyed by what appeared to be nothing more than a messenger craft. "Explain this to me," Zorath demanded. "How is this possible?" Velix studied the battle data. "The human pilot is exceptional. His maneuvers are unpredictable. He takes risks that no rational being would take. Irrational behavior is not a strategy. For humans it appears to be. They do not fight the way we expect. They do not follow logical patterns. It makes them difficult to anticipate. Zorath made a sound of frustration. Destroy that ship. I do not care how many vessels it takes. Inside the Sparrow, Jake was running out of ideas. 9 enemy ships surrounded them. Their shields were nearly gone. Their weapons were almost depleted. They had fought harder than anyone could have expected, but it seemed like the end had finally come. Jake, Amy said softly, it's been an honor. Lisa nodded. Whatever happens, we did good work. Earth has our data. They'll be ready for what's coming. Ryan cracked his knuckles. I still have a few shots left. Let's make them hurt before we go. Jake looked at his crew. These were ordinary people. A teacher, a construction worker, a college student. They had no business fighting an alien armada. But here they were, refusing to give up even when all hope was lost. That was when Jake saw it. A gap in the enemy formation. One of the ships had drifted slightly out of position, creating a tiny window of opportunity. It would require perfect timing and incredible luck. The odds of success were nearly zero. But nearly zero was not zero. Everyone hold on, Jake said. This is going to be rough. He pointed the Sparrow at the gap and fired every remaining torpedo at once. The missiles streaked toward the enemy ships, forcing them to break formation to avoid being hit. In that moment of chaos, Jake pushed the engines beyond their maximum rating. The Sparrow shot through the gap like a bullet through paper. Warning alarms screamed as the ship's systems began to fail. Fire broke out in the engine room. The hull groaned under the stress. But they made it. Behind them, the Velthari ships scrambled to pursue, but they were too slow. The Sparrow reached the edge of the system and engaged its faster-than-light drive. Space folded around them, and they vanished into the stars. On the Crimson Talon, Zorath stood in stunned silence. The tiny human ship had escaped. It had destroyed 3 of his vessels, outmaneuvered 9 more, and disappeared before his eyes. High Commander, Velix said carefully, our intelligence indicated that humans were a primitive species. Perhaps we were wrong. Zorath turned to face his second-in-command. For the first time in his long career, he felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. That was a reconnaissance ship, he said slowly. A scout vessel, the smallest and weakest type of military craft. If that is how their scouts fight, what will their real warriors be like? Velix had no answer. Somewhere in the vastness of space, the Sparrow limped toward home. Jake Morrison and his crew had survived the impossible. They had no idea that their fight was only beginning. The Sparrow arrived at Earth with smoke pouring from its engines and half its systems failing. Emergency crews rushed to meet them as the damaged ship landed at the main military base. Jake Morrison and his crew stepped out to find themselves surrounded by generals, admirals, and reporters. They were heroes. News of their battle had spread across the planet. A single reconnaissance ship had fought an alien armada and survived. People needed hope, and the crew of the Sparrow had given them exactly that. But Jake knew the truth. They had been lucky, and luck would not be enough to save Earth from what was coming. Admiral Chris Porter met with Jake and his crew in a secure briefing room. Porter was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent his entire life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now it was here. The intelligence you gathered is invaluable, Porter said. We know their ship types, their weapons, their shield frequencies. You've given us a fighting chance. With respect, Admiral, Jake replied. They still have over 190 ships. We have 37. The math doesn't work. Porter nodded slowly. You're right. In a straight fight, we would lose, so we're not going to fight straight. He pressed a button, and a holographic map appeared in the center of the room. It showed the path the Velthari fleet would take to reach Earth. We're putting together a special task force, Porter explained. 12 reconnaissance ships, including your Sparrow, once it's repaired. Your mission is to slow them down, hurt them, make them afraid. Lisa frowned. 12 ships against 200? That's suicide. It's not about winning battles, Porter said. It's about buying time. Every day you delay them is another day we have to prepare. Another day to build more ships. Another day for our scientists to find new ways to fight. What about the main fleet? What will they be doing? Porter's expression became unreadable. That's classified, but I promise you, we have a plan. We just need you to give us time. The task force came together quickly. Commander Megan Torres was placed in charge. She was a veteran pilot with 10 years of experience and a reputation for being both brilliant and fearless. Her ship, the Falcon, would lead the squadron. Jake and his crew joined the other ships at a hidden staging area behind Mars. He met the other pilots and crews, ordinary men and women who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a dangerous mission. Some of them might not come home. Listen up, Megan told them during the final briefing. Our job is to make the Velthari miserable. We hit their supply ships. We destroy their communication relays. We plant mines in their path. We hack their systems and fill their heads with fear. We don't fight fair, and we don't stop until they reach Earth or we're all dead. She paused and looked at each of them. Some of us won't survive this. I won't lie to you about that. But everything we do, every ship we destroy, every day we buy, gives our people a better chance. That's worth fighting for. That's worth dying for. No one disagreed. The task force launched into the void. They traveled fast and silent, staying ahead of the Velthari fleet. And then they began their work. The first attack came when the Velthari were passing through an asteroid belt. Jake and 3 other ships had spent 2 days planting explosives on the largest rocks. When the enemy fleet entered the belt, the asteroids exploded like bombs, tearing through their formation. 7 Velthari ships were destroyed before they understood what was happening. The second attack targeted their supply lines. A convoy of fuel and ammunition vessels was traveling behind the main fleet. Megan led a strike team that appeared out of nowhere, destroyed 5 supply ships in 3 minutes, and vanished before the enemy could respond. The third attack was psychological. Amy had become an expert at hacking Velthari communications. She began sending false orders, causing confusion and suspicion among their commanders. She broadcast recordings of the battles they had lost, reminding them that humans could not be easily defeated. High Commander Zorath grew increasingly frustrated. Every day brought new losses, new problems, new embarrassments. His crews were exhausted from constant alerts. His officers were arguing with each other about how to respond. Morale was falling. These humans fight without honor, Zorath complained to Velix. They strike from shadows and run like cowards. They fight to survive, Velix replied, against a superior force. This is the logical approach. It is the approach of prey animals, and yet they are the ones hunting us. Zorath had no answer to that. The Shadow War continued for weeks. The reconnaissance squadron lost ships along the way. Lieutenant Danny Chen and his crew were killed when their vessel was caught in an ambush. Captain Nicole Barrett sacrificed her ship to destroy a Velthari carrier that was about to launch fighters. Each loss was painful, but the survivors kept fighting. Jake became one of the most effective pilots in the squadron. The Sparrow seemed to be everywhere at once, striking targets and disappearing before the enemy could react. Lisa's calculations gave them an edge that other crews did not have. Ryan's shooting was almost supernatural in its accuracy. Amy's hacking caused chaos throughout the Velthari fleet. One night, as they drifted in the darkness between attacks, Lisa asked Jake a question. Do you ever think about what happens if we fail? Jake was quiet for a moment. I try not to. But yeah, sometimes. I think about my parents back on Earth, my little sister, all the people who are counting on us. That's a lot of pressure. It is. But pressure is just motivation, right? Every time I feel tired or scared, I remember why we're doing this. We're not fighting for glory or medals. We're fighting for everyone we love. Lisa smiled. You know, for a cargo pilot, you give pretty good speeches. I learned from watching too many old movies. They laughed together, and for a moment, the war felt far away. By the time the Velthari fleet entered Earth's solar system, it had been reduced from 207 ships to 163, 44 vessels destroyed by 12 reconnaissance ships. It was an incredible achievement, but Jake knew it was not enough. The enemy still outnumbered them. The final battle was coming. But as the squadron gathered near Jupiter to make their last stand, Jake noticed something strange. Admiral Porter had given them specific coordinates, a precise location where they were supposed to wait. Why here? He wondered aloud. Why this exact spot? Megan's voice came over the radio. Because this is where it all comes together. Get ready, everyone. The real show is about to begin. Jake did not understand what she meant, but he trusted his commander. He trusted the plan. He had no idea how big that plan truly was. The remaining 8 ships of the reconnaissance squadron floated in formation near Jupiter. The massive planet hung behind them like a painted backdrop, its swirling storms creating patterns of orange and red. Jake Morrison sat in the pilot's seat of the Sparrow and watched the enemy fleet approach on his sensors. 163 Velthari warships. After weeks of fighting, harassment, and sacrifice, the alien armada was still massive, still deadly, still enough to destroy everything humanity had ever built. This is it, Lisa said quietly. The final stand. Ryan checked his weapons one more time. They had managed to resupply during a brief stop at a hidden station, but their ammunition was still limited. 12 torpedoes, 500 rounds for the pulse cannons, not nearly enough for what was coming. Amy was monitoring enemy communications. They're talking about us. The fleet commander is calling us the Ghost Squadron. He says, we've caused more damage than any enemy force in Velthari history. That's something, I guess, Jake said. Nice to know we'll be remembered. Commander Megan Torres opened a channel to all ships. Squadron, this is Falcon Lead. The enemy will be in weapons range in 15 minutes. I want everyone to stay calm and follow the plan. We've trained for this. We're ready for this. Jake trusted Megan, but he did not understand the plan. They had been ordered to hold this position and wait. Wait for what? 8 small ships could not stop an armada. Even with all their skill and courage, they would be overwhelmed in minutes. But orders were orders. On the Crimson Talon, High Commander Zorath felt a mixture of anticipation and caution. The Ghost Squadron was ahead, a tiny group of ships that had caused him so much trouble. Part of him wanted to crush them immediately. Another part wondered if this was another trap. Analysis, he demanded. What are the humans doing? Sub-Commander Velik studied the tactical display. 8 reconnaissance vessels in standard formation. No support ships, no weapons platforms. They appear to be making a last stand. Why here? Why this location specifically? Unknown. Jupiter's moons provide some cover, but not enough to matter strategically. Perhaps they simply ran out of places to run. Zorath considered this. The humans had been cunning throughout this campaign. They had never done anything without a reason. So why would they choose to die in such an unremarkable location? Slow our approach, Zorath ordered. Send scouts ahead to check for mines or hidden weapons. The scout ships found nothing. No mines, no traps, no hidden forces. Just 8 small vessels waiting to be destroyed. Zorath made his decision. All ships, advance. Destroy the human squadron. The Velthari fleet moved forward like a wave of death. Jake watched them come, and felt his heart beating fast. This was the moment. Whatever was going to happen would happen now. Falcon lead, Jake said over the radio. Permission to speak freely? Go ahead, Sparrow. What exactly are we waiting for? Megan's voice was calm. You'll see in about 30 seconds. Jake counted in his head. 29, 28, 27. At 15 seconds, Amy's instruments began to register something strange. Massive energy signatures were appearing behind them, near Jupiter's largest moon. At 10 seconds, Lisa looked up from her console with wide eyes. Jake, you need to see this. At 5 seconds, Ryan started laughing, a deep, joyful sound that filled the cockpit. At 0, space itself seemed to tear open. From behind the moon Ganymede, ships began to emerge. Not dozens, hundreds. Warships of every size poured out of hidden positions, their engines blazing like stars. Battleships, carriers, an entire fleet that had been built in secret, hidden from alien eyes, waiting for this exact moment. Jake counted 218 human warships, more than the Velthari had brought, more than anyone had thought possible. Admiral Porter's voice boomed across all frequencies. Velthari fleet, this is Admiral Christopher Porter of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered our territory. You have threatened our world. You have underestimated our people. That was a mistake. On the Crimson Talon, Zorath stared at his view screen in horror. Where had these ships come from? His intelligence had said the humans had fewer than 40 vessels. This was impossible. How? He whispered. How did they hide an entire fleet? Velix was frantically checking data. The reconnaissance ships, they weren't just fighting us. They were distracting us, keeping our attention focused away from Earth while they built their real force. The truth hit Zorath like a physical blow. Every battle, every ambush, every psychological attack had served a single purpose: to make him believe he was facing the full strength of humanity, to make him focus on the Ghost Squadron while the real threat assembled in secret. He had been fooled completely. Admiral Porter continued his broadcast. You have one chance to surrender. Lower your shields and power down your weapons. If you refuse, we will destroy your fleet. Zorath's pride demanded that he fight. The Velthari had never surrendered to anyone. But his tactical mind saw the reality. His ships were tired and damaged from weeks of harassment. His crews were demoralized. The humans had fresh ships, fresh crews, and home advantage. Before he could make a decision, the human fleet attacked. Jake found himself in the middle of the largest space battle in human history. Ships clashed all around him, exchanging fire in brilliant displays of light and destruction. The reconnaissance squadron had a special job: target enemy commanders and communication ships. Take out the brain of the Velthari fleet. Sparrow, you have a clear path to the enemy flagship, Megan called out. Can you reach it? Jake looked at the chaos between him and the Crimson Talon. Enemy ships everywhere. Weapons fire crossing in all directions. It was suicide to try. We can do it, he said. Lisa plotted the course. Ryan armed every weapon they had. Amy jammed enemy communications to clear their path. And Jake flew like he had never flown before. The Sparrow weaved through the battle, dodging shots that should have destroyed them, slipping through gaps that should not have existed. They passed burning Velthari cruisers and destroyed human frigates. They flew through clouds of debris that had been warships moments before. And then they were there. The Crimson Talon filled their view screen, massive and terrifying. Ryan hit them with everything. Ryan fired. 12 torpedoes streaked toward the enemy flagship. The Crimson Talon's point defense systems destroyed 8 of them. 3 more hit the shields, but did no damage. The last torpedo found the gap in the shield cycle. It struck the flagship's weapons array and detonated. The Crimson Talon shook. On its bridge, Zorath fell to the floor as explosions rocked his ship. His weapons were gone. Human warships were closing in from all sides. All ships, Zorath said, his voice filled with defeat. Stand down. We surrender. The battle was over. The Velthari had lost. Jake Morrison floated in the wreckage of the battlefield, watching the enemy ships power down their weapons. Around him, the crews of the reconnaissance squadron were cheering. They had done it. Against all odds, they had won. But Jake knew the war was not truly over. This was just the beginning. The Velthari Empire would send more ships. Other alien races would take notice of humanity. The galaxy had changed forever. Earth had proven itself, and nothing would ever be the same. The aftermath of the battle was unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. Destroyed ships drifted through space like broken toys. Rescue vessels moved between the wreckage, searching for survivors from both sides. The light of distant stars reflected off twisted metal and shattered hulls. Earth had won, but the cost had been high. 34 human ships destroyed. Over 2,000 lives lost. Families on every continent would receive messages that their loved ones were not coming home. But the Velthari had paid a heavier price. 97 of their ships were destroyed. 51 more had surrendered and were now under human control. Only 15 had managed to escape, fleeing back to report their defeat to the Empire. High Commander Zoreth was taken prisoner aboard a human transport ship. His scales had lost their shine, and his 4 eyes stared blankly at the walls of his cell. In 3,000 years of Velthari history, no commander had ever lost so completely. 1 week after the battle, Jake received orders to report to Earth Command Headquarters. He and his crew were cleaned up, given fresh uniforms, and escorted to a large chamber where important people gathered. Politicians, generals, scientists, and reporters filled the room. Admiral Porter stood at a podium and addressed the crowd. Today we honor the heroes who made our victory possible. The men and women of the reconnaissance squadron faced impossible odds and never gave up. They bought us the time we needed to build our fleet. They broke the enemy's spirit before the real battle began. One by one, the surviving members of the squadron were called forward to receive medals. When Jake's name was announced, the room erupted in applause. He walked to the podium with Lisa, Ryan, and Amy beside him. They had started this journey as strangers. Now, they were family. After the ceremony, Admiral Porter approached Jake privately. "There's one more thing we need you to do, Lieutenant. The Velthari commander has requested to speak with you." Jake was surprised. "With me? Why?" "He wants to understand. He can't accept that he was defeated by what he calls a ghost squadron. I think talking to you might help him come to terms with what happened." Jake agreed. He followed Porter to a secure holding area where Zorath was being kept. The alien sat alone in a simple room, looking much older than he had during the battle. "You came," Zorath said when Jake entered. His voice was tired, but still carried a hint of his former authority. "I was not sure you would." Jake sat down across from him. "You wanted to talk. I'm listening." Zorath studied the young human carefully. "You were the pilot of the first ship we encountered. The one that destroyed my interceptors and escaped my fleet." "That's right. I have studied the records of your battles. Your tactics were brilliant. Your bravery was remarkable. You fought like a warrior born for combat." Zorath paused. "I assumed you were one of your species' finest soldiers, a special operative with years of training." Jake almost laughed. "I was a cargo pilot. Before the war, I flew supply ships between Earth and Mars. My co-pilot was a math teacher. Our gunner worked construction. Our communications officer was still in college." Zorath stared at him for a long moment. "You are not soldiers?" "We are now. But we weren't when this started. We were just ordinary people who were asked to do something important." "Ordinary people," Zorath repeated slowly, as if the words made no sense. "The force that destroyed my interceptors, evaded my fleet, killed my warriors, and led the attack on my flagship was crewed by ordinary people. Pretty much. Zorath leaned back in his chair. The fight seemed to drain out of him completely. We have conquered 17 star systems. We have defeated species with advanced technology and vast armies. But we have never faced anything like you. Why? Jake asked. What makes us different? Zorath thought carefully before answering. Other species fight because they must. They calculate odds, measure resources, and surrender when defeat is certain. It is the logical thing to do. He gestured toward Jake. Your people do not do this. You fight when you cannot win. You sacrifice yourselves for each other. You refuse to surrender even when all hope is lost. That's not irrational, Jake said. That's faith. We believe in each other. We believe in what we're fighting for. And as long as we believe, there's always hope. Zorath nodded slowly. I think I understand now. We thought we were invading a primitive world. Instead, we attacked a species that does not know how to give up. He met Jake's eyes. The Velthari Empire will send more ships. They will want revenge for this defeat. Let them come, Jake said. We'll be ready. I believe you will. The conversation ended, but Jake thought about Zorath's words for a long time afterward. The alien commander had conquered dozens of worlds, but he had never truly understood what made humanity special. It was not their technology or their weapons. It was their refusal to accept defeat. 6 months later, the Velthari Empire sent ambassadors instead of warships. They wanted peace. The news of their defeat had spread across the galaxy, and other empires were watching. Humanity had proven itself to be more than a young, primitive species. They were warriors who could not be easily broken. Jake Morrison left the military after the peace treaty was signed. He returned to civilian life and tried to be normal again. But normal felt strange after everything he had experienced. He missed the Sparrow. He missed his crew. He missed the feeling of doing something that mattered. Lisa became a military strategist, teaching new pilots the tactics they had developed during the war. Ryan started a training program for ground combat forces, preparing humanity for whatever threats might come next. Amy got a job in military intelligence, using her hacking skills to monitor alien communications across the galaxy. They stayed in touch. Once a month, they would meet at a small bar near the old military base and share stories about their new lives. Sometimes, other veterans would join them. People who had been through the fire and understood what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. One night, Amy raised her glass. To the Ghost Squadron, the 12 ships that changed history. To the ones who didn't make it home, Lisa added quietly. They drank in silence, remembering the friends they had lost. Jake looked around the table at the people who had become his second family. They had been ordinary once, teachers and workers and students, with no idea what fate had in store for them. Now they were legends, the reconnaissance team that broke an empire. You know what I keep thinking about? Jake said. Somewhere out there, alien commanders are telling their crews about us, warning them about what happens when you underestimate humans. We're not just a story on Earth anymore, we're a story everywhere. Ryan grinned. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them remember what happens when they threaten our home. Outside the bar window, the stars shone bright and cold. Somewhere among them, new threats were gathering. New challenges were waiting. Humanity had passed its first test, but it would not be the last. Jake Morrison did not know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together, and together, they would never fall. That was the human way. That was why they would survive. That was why they would always win. The Velthari Empire had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. They had conquered 17 star systems and crushed every species that stood in their way. Their warships were massive, their weapons were powerful, and their soldiers knew nothing but victory. No race had ever defeated them in battle. High Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon. He was tall even by Velthari standards, with dark green scales that shimmered under the ship's lights. His 4 eyes watched the viewscreen as his fleet moved through the darkness of space. 200 warships followed behind him, each one carrying enough firepower to burn a city to ash. Their target was a small blue planet called Earth. Velthari's scouts had watched the humans for years. They were a young species, barely able to travel between the planets of their own star system. They had no empire, no great fleet, and no experience with galactic war. Zorath expected the conquest to take less than a week. "High Commander," said Subcommander Velix, approaching with a data tablet, "we will reach the human homeworld in 6 standard cycles. Our intelligence shows they have fewer than 40 warships in their entire defense force." Zorath made a sound of amusement. 40 ships against 200? This will not be a battle. It will be an execution. Velix nodded. "Shall I prepare the standard ultimatum?" "Yes. Give them 1 planetary rotation to surrender. If they refuse, we will make an example of their largest cities." The Velthari fleet continued its journey through the void. Zorath retired to his quarters, confident that nothing could stop what was coming. He had conquered dozens of worlds. Earth would be no different. But Zorath did not know about the small ship that had been watching his fleet from behind an asteroid field. He did not know about the 4 humans inside that ship who were about to change everything. Lieutenant Jake Morrison gripped the controls of his reconnaissance vessel, the Sparrow. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. He had been a cargo pilot before joining the Earth Defense Force. He never expected to find himself staring at an alien invasion fleet. "How many ships?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. Sergeant Lisa Hartwell checked her instruments. She was the navigator and systems expert, a former math teacher who had joined the military when Earth first made contact with alien life. Her mind was sharp, and she could calculate complex equations faster than most computers. "I count 207 vessels," Lisa reported. "The big one in the center is probably their command ship. Jake, this is bad. This is really bad." In the back of the Sparrow, Corporal Ryan Diaz was checking the weapons systems. He was a large man with thick arms and a calm face. Before joining the military, he had worked construction in Texas. Now he operated the guns on a spaceship. "We have 12 torpedoes and about 300 rounds for the pulse cannons," Ryan said. "If we have to fight, it won't last long." Private Amy Lawson was the youngest member of the crew. She had just turned 22 and handled communications. Her fingers flew across her console as she recorded everything they were seeing. "I'm getting their transmission frequencies," Amy said. "If I can crack their encryption, we might be able to listen to their communications." Jake thought about their options. The smart thing to do was run. Report back to Earth and let the admirals figure out what to do. But if they ran now, they would lose the chance to gather valuable intelligence, information that could save millions of lives. "We stay," Jake decided. "Amy, keep recording everything. Lisa, I need you to analyze their ships, find weaknesses, patterns, anything we can use. Ryan, keep the weapons hot, but don't fire unless I give the order." "Jake," Lisa said quietly, "if they see us, we're dead. Then we better make sure they don't see us." For 2 hours, the Sparrow drifted in silence, collecting data on the Velthari fleet. Amy managed to break into their communication system and listen to their transmissions. Lisa mapped the positions of every ship and identified the types of weapons they carried. Ryan counted the fighters stored in each carrier. Then everything went wrong. A Velthari patrol ship changed course and headed directly toward the asteroid field where the Sparrow was hiding. Jake watched the approaching ship on his screen and felt his stomach drop. "They've spotted us," Lisa said. Jake fired up the engines. There was no point in hiding now. "Amy, Send everything we've collected back to Earth. Maximum encryption. If we don't make it, at least they'll have the data. Transmission sent, Amy confirmed. The Velthari patrol ship opened fire. Green energy bolts streaked past the Sparrow as Jake threw the small craft into a series of wild maneuvers. He dove between asteroids, using the rocks as cover. Another shot clipped their shields, and the whole ship shook. Shields at 70%, Lisa reported. On the Crimson Talon, High Commander Zorath was informed of the situation. He watched the tactical display with mild interest as the tiny human vessel fled from his patrol ship. "What is that craft?" he asked. "It appears to be a reconnaissance vessel," Velix answered. "Very small, minimal weapons. It was hiding in the asteroid field, likely spying on our fleet." Zorath waved his clawed hand dismissively. "Destroy it." But destroying the Sparrow was proving difficult. Jake flew like a man possessed, pushing the small ship beyond its limits. Every time the Velthari patrol thought they had him, he would slip away at the last moment. "They're calling for backup," Amy said, her voice tight. 2 more ships incoming. 3 against 1. The odds were impossible. But Jake had no intention of dying today. "Lisa, tell me you found something useful in all that data." Lisa's eyes lit up. Their shields cycle every 0.3 seconds. There's a tiny gap when they refresh. If Ryan can time a shot perfectly... "I can do it," Ryan said. "Just get me a clear angle." Jake spun the Sparrow around and flew directly at the nearest enemy ship. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was exactly what the Velthari did not expect. Ryan fired a single torpedo. It passed through the shield gap at the precise moment and struck the enemy vessel in its engine section. The Velthari ship exploded in a ball of fire. On the Crimson Talon, Zorath stared at his view screen in disbelief. A tiny human scout ship had just destroyed one of his interceptors. "What just happened?" he demanded. No one had an answer. The battle was far from over. 2 more enemy ships were closing in, and the Sparrow was running low on power. But Jake Morrison and his crew had done something incredible. They had drawn first blood against an empire that had never known defeat. And they were just getting started.